The last 24 hours have brought shock and grief following reports out of Australia. A Hanukkah party on Bondi Beach was targeted in a mass shooting attack. 15 people were murdered, others were wounded, and now a chilling detail. The suspects are reported a father and son, and explosive devices for a larger attack were found at the scene of the attack. Israeli officials have also pointed a finger of accusation at the Australian media for paving the way for this atrocity with their irresponsible coverage of recent events, and warnings of an impending attack were also reportedly passed on to the Australian law enforcement agencies, but they don't seem to have been taking them very seriously. And now, there is a growing assessment that Iran was behind this attack, as the Australian authorities have declared that there will be a strong crackdown on incitement. But was this attack inevitable? Was the handwriting on the wall? Iran has been allowed to build up a large terrorist infrastructure in Australia, and the details are beginning to emerge. We'll tell you what we know so far. And back in Israel, the IDF continues to carry out operations in the Gaza Strip, as Hamas announced a replacement of Raad Saad, the second in command of the organization, who was eliminated in an airstrike over the weekend. We will tell you who remains at the top of Hamas in the Gaza Strip amidst Israel's determined campaign to disarm Hamas. We will also bring you information about the mole that infiltrated the Holy of Holies of Hamas's senior leadership and how it's driving them crazy. They're also driving other people crazy, including US President Donald Trump, because they keep refusing to live up to the conditions of his ceasefire plan. And we'll bring you some more details about this as well. In the northern arena, it's also heating up as the IDF revealed that it has eliminated 40 Hezbollah terrorists since the beginning of October in the southern Lebanon area. IDF Chief of Staff Yair issued a fresh warning to Hezbollah, including an elimination map in Lebanon, saying that Hezbollah violated the agreement 1,900 times since it entered into force. And further away, in Iran, the regime is trembling as the most basic and important consumer product is running out, while the Houthis in Yemen are in panic and adopting a survival strategy intimidation. So welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. And today, we will light the second Hanukkah candle. So happy Hanukkah to every home of the people of Israel and around the world. It's the second night of Hanukkah, so let's go over the headlines of the last 24 hours together. The big story that Israelis are following today is, of course, the terrorist attack in Australia that resulted in 15 fatalities and at least 60 people that were wounded. Two gunmen, later identified as a father and son, opened fire on a Hanukkah event on Bondi Beach, managing to evade the police response for several minutes before being stopped, partially by an unarmed civilian. In recent months, the Mossad passed warnings to Australian law enforcement agencies and also intelligence agencies that Iran is building an infrastructure to attack the Jewish communities. According to the information, it smuggled weapons and created incitement cells on social media networks. And last night, it was revealed the terrorist Sajid Akram, who was eliminated, is the father of the second terrorist, Nabid, who was seriously wounded and arrested. In their vehicle, an ISIS flag was found, together with improvised explosive devices. The victims of this attack include a 10-year-old girl and 87-year-old elderly man, and we'll bring you all the details, including the partial responsibility of the Australian government, universities, and also the media, which have failed to push back against anti-Semitic incitement in Australia, in the society there, and sometimes even promoted it. The road from hateful graffiti to live fire was shorter than ever in this case, and we'll bring you all the details of this. In the Gaza Strip, the elimination of Raad Saad left Hamas top leadership in a state of significant leadership paralysis. The assessment is that the organization will now struggle to make long-term strategic decisions, while could cause the hardening of the positions in the contracts of this current agreement. For instance, the head of the political wing of the terrorist organization Hamas has set new conditions for Hamas's continued cooperation with Trump's peace plan. This, while the terrorist organization still has not fulfilled all the agreements of the first stage, as the body of Sergeant First Class Ran Geveli has not yet been returned to Israel. The second stage is expected to include disarming Hamas and bringing an international force into the Gaza Strip, clauses that the terrorist Al-Hayya strongly opposes. And meanwhile, the list of Hamas senior figures in Gaza is shrinking after Saad's elimination over the weekend, and only a few remain at the top. But Hamas announced a replacement for Saad on Sunday, and we'll tell you what we know about him. In the northern arena, the pace of events is not slowing down, as the IDF struck 3 terrorists who were involved in rebuilding Hezbollah's terrorist infrastructure in Lebanon on Sunday. However, Israel refrained from striking in the village of Yanuach after the Lebanese army committed to evacuate weapons from a Hezbollah building. The IDF also published a map of 40 eliminations since October in southern Lebanon in 30 villages, along with documentation showing that Hezbollah violated the agreement 1,900 times, as the IDF prepares for the possibility of an intense military action against Hezbollah. Next though, in Syria, after the unusual incident in which 2 American soldiers and a civilian interpreter were terminated by an ISIS gunman, interim President Abu Muhammad al-Julani declared that Syria is entering a new stage of rebuilding the country based on partnership with the people and establishing stability. Do you think it's possible? Do you think he's serious? Do you think he's really in control of what's happening in Syria? Let me know what you think in the comments. And meanwhile, in Yemen, Israel's successes in striking Houthi leaders deepened in the security panic within this terrorist organization and caused a massive wave of arrests and accusations on spying for Israel. By cultivating fear, the Houthis seek to tighten internal control. And speaking of fear, Iran's Ayatollah regime is trembling as the most basic and important consumer products are running out. Senior figures in Iran's pharmaceutical sector warn of a severe shortage in basic medicine, inventories, and infant formula, saying that there is less than 2 months' worth of supplies that are still left, and about 800 medications are expected to disappear from the market due to rising prices, infrastructure failure, and massive debts. This comes on top of the drought, which hasn't ended, and the increasing problem of air pollution in Iranian cities. As you can see, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel during this war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. Today is the second night of Hanukkah, and before we begin, I would like to thank you for all the support. Help us spread the truth by sharing this video with as many people as possible. And now, we will begin with the details that have emerged so far about the anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Australia. The authorities in Australia issued an updated statement on Sunday evening that the number of fatalities in the attack at Bondi Beach in Sydney rose to 15, and that amongst it are 10-year-old girl, while the oldest victim is 87. At the same time, police in Sydney said that the 2 terrorists are a father and his son, Saeed Karam, 50 years of age, and was eliminated at the scene, while his son, Nabid Akram, 24 years of age, was seriously wounded. According to the police, the father, Saeed, held a license for 6 firearms, and during the attack, the terrorists were documented using at least 3 different rifles. The police also find an ISIS flag in the terrorist vehicle, and Australia's ABC network reported that the Australian Security Intelligence Organization conducted a check 6 years ago regarding Nabid Akram due to his close ties to a terrorist cell of the organization in Sydney. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese later announced that there is no suspicion that a third terrorist was involved in the attack, as was examined earlier. He also described the attack as an act of pure evil aimed against Australia's Jews. The timeline of the attack goes like this. At 5 p.m., the Hanukkah by the Sea event opened at Bondi Beach with more than 1,000 celebrants. At 6:47 p.m., the two terrorists arrived in a vehicle with an ISIS flag, go up onto a nearby bridge and open fire towards the people that were celebrating the lighting of the Hanukkah. At 7:05 p.m., almost 20 minutes after the violent incident began, the police finally issued a public warning to take cover. By 7:20, the shooting was still continuing, and one terrorist came down from the bridge and fired from inside the park before an unarmed civilian, Ahmed El-Ahmed, charged at him from behind together with another person and wounded him. The wounded terrorist returned to the bridge while the second continued firing. At 7:30, the police had finally managed to neutralize and handcuff both terrorists. The father was later pronounced as unalive, while the son was severely wounded. And at 9 p.m., the scene was closed as the vehicle of the terrorist arrived and was found, and the improvised explosive devices inside it were neutralized. At 9:20 p.m., the police raided their home in Bondi and arrested 2 people. So I would like to take this opportunity to extend my personal thanks and respect to Ahmed El-Ahmed, the man who grabbed the weapon off of one of the terrorists who carried out the shooting attack. This married father of 2 was also hit by 2 bullets during the incident and was taken to the hospital to receive treatment for his wounds. So please join me in praying for his full recovery and protection moving forward. Now, to make a brief comment, there can be no metaphors of political correct language here. The mass shooting event at the Hanukkah festival in Bondi Beach in Australia is an anti-Semitic hate crime and a terrorist attack. The legal process will do its work, and there will be indictments, hearings, and also dry technical definitions. But morally, socially, and journalistically, the situation is not complex at all. As Jews gathered publicly to celebrate a Jewish holiday and were hunted for it. When a minority community is attacked in the middle of a religious celebration, a proper state cannot hide behind slogans of "we'll wait for the details to emerge" as a substitute for actual moral clarity. So to be very blunt, no one should be surprised that it has come to this. Australia has abandoned its Jews time after time. Anti-Semitism has risen in Australia for many years now, and there have been countless incidents of harassment and violence, but the government mostly looked the other way, while far too many institutions responded with hesitation, sanitized euphemisms, and excuses. The government, the law enforcement agencies, universities, and the media failed to be responsible adults as protests outside the Sydney Opera House were normalized. Doxing campaigns turned Jews and Jewish names into a target. Jews forbidden. There were Jews forbidden zones that grew on campuses, and kosher businesses and synagogues were set on fire or vandalized. Foreign actors marked Jewish institutions as a soft target, while the response from Australia's government and the civil society remained hesitant, and the media at times refused to call reality by its name and clearly define anti-Semitic violence. A country that was a refuge for Holocaust survivors in previous generations has a moral obligation to treat anti-Semitism as a national security issue, to enforce the law decisively, to prosecute inciters and attackers, to demand accountability at universities, and to ensure that Jews can be seen in public without fearing for their lives. If Australia does not protect its Jewish citizens in broad daylight on the holiday of freedom, it loses its true moral image. It also fuels the general sense that is present in many Western countries that conditions are getting worse for ordinary people, while their governments are not really in control of anything anymore, and that's bad for everybody. And on that note, the Australian Police Commissioner claimed that there was no prior intelligence in the hands of the police about this attack, while the head of the security services, Mike Burgess, admitted that one of the shooters was known to the authorities but not as posing an immediate threat. President Herzog and Foreign Minister Yair of Israel accused the Australian government of ignoring the warning signs and not stopping in time the wave of anti-Semitism rising in the streets of Australia. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel is in a battle against global anti-Semitism and that there is no other way but to condemn it and fight it, as our Hashmonaim forefathers did during the time of the Maccabean revolt. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on everything that is happening in Australia, but also around the world. And as always, we ask you to help us share these videos, follow us on social media, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, I want to speak to you for just a moment about one of our partners. We are in the midst of the Christmas season, also Hanukkah season, when our hearts return to Bethlehem and the birth of Jesus. Just a short distance this way, away from where I'm standing here in Jerusalem. So, as I walk the streets of the city of Jerusalem, where I was born and grew up, I see many reminders that my country has been through so much this war. The fighting may have stopped for now, but recovery is slow. Communities are still rebuilding, families are healing, and tourism, which is a major engine of the economy, especially in Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and especially at Christmas, is just beginning to show signs of a comeback. So, Israel is healing, but it takes time, it takes faith, and it takes friends. So, when people ask, how can I help Israel right now? I say, bless Israel this season. And that's why we partner with Arza, an Israeli small business that has been with us for a few years now. Arza works with artisans in Jerusalem, the Galilee, and Bethlehem to create handmade pieces from the Holy Land straight to your houses. Each season, they gather these gifts into an Arza box. Whether you've never been here or you've walked these streets before, it's a taste of the land of the Bible. Many of the Arza team served in Israel's reserves in the IDF near the front lines and are now rebuilding their lives. So when you purchase an Arza box, you bless Israel, you keep small businesses alive, and you help families rebuild. This year's Christmas box is Nativity Night, bringing that holy night in Bethlehem into your home. So go to arzabox.com and use the coupon code TBNIL for an extra 20% off of your subscription. Again, that's arzabox.com and use the coupon code TBNIL for an extra 20% off of your subscription. So bless Israel this Christmas, support Israeli artisans, bring the Holy Land into your home. And now, we're getting back into the news and shifting our focus to the Gaza Strip. After the elimination of Hamas's second-in-command of the military wing, Raed Saad, over the weekend, many things are beginning to move very quickly. There is a saying in sports that no one remembers the person who got second place. But this isn't sports, it's war. And in this case, it was very important to remember the second-in-command of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. He was a key figure in Hamas's military wing, responsible for force buildup and maintenance, while he reached his peak as head of the operations department, but he won't be doing that any longer. Some of his senior aides and assistants were also eliminated in the strike, which means that Hamas has now lost a lot of its most experienced remaining leadership. The IDF spokesperson announced that Raed Saad led the buildup of the Hamas terrorist organization, and his elimination constitutes a significant blow to the organization's ability to build up. It was also stated that Saad was a leading factor in the leadership of Hamas's military wing in recent months, and was directly responsible for violations of the ceasefire agreement. Within his role, Saad led the continued production of weapons in the Gaza Strip during the ceasefire. Speaking of ceasefire violations by Hamas, The IDF and the Shin Bet stated in a message that since the start of the ceasefire agreement, and especially during the last 2 weeks, repeated attempts by Hamas to produce and carry out terrorist attacks were identified. Many were stopped before they began, while others were successful and produced casualties amongst the IDF troops. Side's termination was a direct response to these violations, and a senior security source said that Israel settled accounts with the senior Hamas terrorist and one of the architects of the October 7th massacre. The source added that the next in line for elimination is Izzadin al-Haddad, the head of Hamas's military wing in the Gaza Strip, and added that no Hamas terrorist that is engaged in terror activities has immunity. And on that note, after the elimination of Side, Hamas's military wing was left with only a few senior figures. The head of the military wing is Izzadin al-Haddad, Muhammad Oda, who is the head of the organization's intelligence array, Muhammad Rajab, who is the head of Gaza Brigade, and a few battalion commanders. Sources in the Gaza Strip close to Hamas have confirmed that all surviving senior figures of Hamas's military wing went underground and disappeared from sight once again. This came following a few weeks in which, following the ceasefire agreement, some of them moved openly above ground and felt confident that Israel will not eliminate them. It is also important to point out that the ability of Israel to track and eliminate so many senior Hamas figures in the Gaza Strip indicates deep intelligence penetration by Israel into the organization. Hamas knows this, and there are indications that it's making them paranoid and deeply suspicious of each other. And while all of this is going on, Hamas continues to play games with the negotiations meant to advance the ceasefire plan put forward by US President Donald Trump. Hamas's leader in the Gaza Strip, Khalil al-Hayya, delivered a speech over the weekend in which he declared his opposition to most of the clauses of Trump's 20-point plan, especially the second stage, which includes disarming Hamas and bringing in an international force that would manage Gaza without Palestinian elements. This comes as Hamas still has not met all the commitments of the first stage, including the return of the body of Staff First Class in Reserves, Ran Govali. El-Hayya declared, amongst the other things, that the weapon is a right guaranteed in international law for people under occupation. We must preserve this right to ensure the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. He emphasized that Hamas will not disarm and will not accept any plan that does not include a path to establishing a Palestinian state and the right to self-determination. And regarding the international force, he said, its role should be limited to safeguarding the ceasefire and separating between the two sides and the borders of the Gaza Strip without tasks being imposed on it inside the Gaza Strip area. At the end of his speech, he accused Israel of violating the agreements and called on the guarantor states, and especially the United States, not to interfere in the affairs of Hamas and the Palestinian people. So, let me know what you think about that. Do you think that the terrorist organization should lead the Palestinian people and should have anything to say about it to the mediating countries, the United States and European countries, as well as Israel? Let me know what you think in the comment section. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel, and it's very important that you continue spreading it with as many people as possible. Unfortunately, too many people do not get what really is happening here because there are so many lies going around. So we need your help in sharing this video and hitting the subscribe button. Thanks. And now, we're switching our focus to the northern arena because the Israeli Air Force has been very active over the last 24 hours, carrying out 3 targeted eliminations and hitting other Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. According to the IDF, the terrorists who were struck were working to rebuild infrastructure of the Hezbollah terrorist organization in southern Lebanon. However, Israel also refrained from acting in the village of Yanuach after the IDF yesterday identified in one of the buildings an attempt by Hezbollah to turn the structure into a large weapons storage facility. The reason that the IDF held back is that the Lebanese army requested time to check out the facility themselves and were sent to clear the content of this building, but after encountering resistance, it left the site. The IDF then announced that it would strike the building, and even the IDF spokesperson in Arabic, Colonel Avichai Aderi, issued an evacuation notice to the residents of that area. However, while Air Force planes were on their way to hit the building, the Lebanese turned to the Ceasefire Monitoring Committee and committed to remove the weapons contents from this building. We'll keep an eye on this situation to see what develops. As stated, since the morning hours, the IDF struck 3 Hezbollah terrorists in different areas in southern Lebanon, specifically in villages of Binjbel and Yatir. Amongst those targeted was a Hezbollah liaison officer operating in the southern villages, as well as terrorists who were engaged in the physical restoration of Hezbollah's fighting infrastructure. In the IDF spokesperson's statement, it was said that the terrorists were engaged in attempts to rehabilitate infrastructure of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. Their actions constituted a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. Furthermore, in preparation for the possibility of an intense military operation in Lebanon to thwart Hezbollah's rehabilitation attempts, the IDF revealed a map of the eliminations that it carried out in the south of the country since the beginning of October, and said it eliminated at least 40 terrorists in 30 villages. The statement went on to say that these terrorists joined more than 380 terrorists that were eliminated since the ceasefire went into effect, during which Hezbollah violated the agreement more than 1,900 times. Later on Sunday, the IDF struck for the third time and eliminated Zakaria Yahya El-Hajj, who served as the senior Hezbollah terrorist in the Juwiya area in southern Lebanon. The IDF issued a statement saying that within the framework of his role, he activated agents with Lebanon's security mechanisms and worked to suppress criticism by opponents of the terrorist organization in Lebanon. The terrorist activity constituted a threat to the State of Israel and to its citizens, and a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. The IDF will continue to act to remove any threat to the State of Israel. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report all the truth. And as always, I want to ask you to help us spreading it. Tell your friend, tell your neighbor. Send this video to somebody who wants to know what's happening in Israel so that they will know how to pray for the situation. And now, we are switching our focus to the Houthis in Yemen. Israel's successes in eliminating senior Houthi figures, including the Chief of Staff Muhammad Abdel El-Karim El-Gamari in October, pushed the organization into a state of panic and confusion. Intelligence reports indicate that after seeing how Israel eliminated senior Hezbollah commanders in 2024, the Houthis became convinced that technology enables Israel deadly precision and began to almost completely avoid electronic communications. Phone use was restricted, especially amongst the military and the security ranks, and they returned to face-to-face meetings, reducing leadership gatherings, and ordered units to operate independently in the event of a communication cutoff, which undermines the unity and the effectiveness of the central command that had been a source of their strength. According to an article on the Amawaj media portal, deep paranoia and a massive wave of arrests emerged in the wake of the failure of these measures to prevent the assassination of senior leaders. Hundreds were arrested, including more than 50 United Nations employees, on suspicion of spying for Israel. The Houthi leader accused them publicly, and a court in Sana'a recently handed over down the death sentences to 17 defendants of espionage for hostile states, including Israel, Britain, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. The crackdown is intended to signal to the public that the security failures are not due to internal betrayal and to deter any contact or any leak. However, no one should be under any illusions that these moves will solve the problem of Israeli intelligence penetration of Houthi ranks. Israel knows how to disrupt functioning and the chain of the command while in parallel, despite attacking ships and firing missiles, the Houthis declare that the confrontation with Israel will continue, and Israel defines them as a strategic target. In other words, Yemen is becoming a long-term battlefield between Israel and Iran, while solidarity with the Palestinians is being exposed to the world as more of an excuse than actually the main point. What do you think about that? Think that the Houthis really care about the Palestinian people? Let me know. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report about all the truth that's happening in Israel, so help us share it and hit the subscribe button. And now we're shifting our focus to Iran. And this also brings us back to what is known about the terrorist attacks in Australia. The murderous attack in Australia shocked and angered Israelis, but there are many who are not surprised by it because they've been warning about the possibility of such an attack for weeks now. Especially the Israeli Mossad came out of the shadows in late November and put on the table the warnings and the intelligence information about terror cells operating the organization in Australia and in additional countries in a transparent and clear way before the eyes of the entire public and the decision makers in Australia and in Europe. The Mossad announced that in such an attack, Sunni jihadist groups will be implicated, while Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps will escape blame despite being the real force behind this attack. The IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, will do this through the use of high compartmentalization, recruiting foreigners, using criminals, and covert communications. At the top of the Mossad statement is the phrase, "This is what the behind the scenes of Iranian terror mechanisms look like." Therefore, the former Mossad warned that Iran is running a campaign of planned global terrorism against Israeli and Jewish targets in Australia, in Europe, and in other countries. Many of these attacks have already been broken up in Australia and Greece and in Germany, and over the past 2 years, saving many human lives. Therefore, a mechanism led by the Sardar Ammar, and including Ismail Kani, a senior officer in the Revolutionary Guards, was also exposed. Kani commanded the network of around 11,000 operatives and infrastructures for the attacks in Israel and outside it. And following the exposure of this mechanism, Australia and Germany took diplomatic steps against Iranian senior officials, including expelling an ambassador and summoning diplomats for a formal reprimand. So, according to Israeli security sources, Iran uses terror as a tool of collecting a price from Israel by harming Jews around the world, while maintaining the ability for political and military deniability. I've said many times that this is a spiritual war, and we know what spiritual forces are behind the Ayatollah regime in Iran, but we also know that the fastest growing underground church in the world is in Iran. So please join me in praying for the people of Iran to have better leadership and against this regime. Here's some points to pray into. Iran's regime is collapsing politically, while the society is collapsing economically, environmentally, and in many other ways. But still, the regime is devoting all its resources, all its money, all its time, and all its attention to projects that feed off and into its inexplicable hatred of Israel. They are building missiles right now at a super fast pace as their cities are drying out. The air is so polluted that even simple breathing is painful. There is barely electricity and citizens are suffering in many other ways. Some of those citizens are complaining, but many are so beaten down by the situation that they don't even have any energy to complain any longer. And besides that, the regime executes citizens for every little thing and puts them in prisons. And meanwhile, the Revolutionary Guards promote terror against Jews and Israelis around the world, funding terrorist groups and criminal syndicates willing to work with them while ordinary Iranians starve and suffer. Now there is a new problem looming for these long-suffering people. The media portal Iran International reported this week that senior officials in Iran's Pharmaceutical Association warned that the country's stocks of medicine and baby formula are sufficient for less than 2 months, and there is concern for a shortage of about 800 types of medications within 3 months. According to these officials, without an immediate change in the currency policy, insurance functioning, and regulations of the state's debts, the crisis will only worsen, with the first and main victims being the patients. Also notable is that this week, Iran's currency reached an all-time low, trading at around 1.3 million rials for $1. But that's what happens when an extreme Islamic regime captures youth at universities and brainwashes them, makes a revolution, and focuses only on extreme religious hatred. In case you missed the point that I'm trying to make here, I advise everyone in Western countries to take a really close look at what's going on at your own university campuses, where impressionable young people are being brainwashed into believing all kinds of absurd nonsense. Those young people are already acting on these absurd ideals, and this will only continue and escalate moving forward unless someone does something about it. So let's start by sharing the truth and by praying. Here at Boots on the Ground, we will continue to bring you everything that we know is happening here. And we want to call on you to pray. Let's start then praying for the attack victims in Australia. So far, the names of 7 of the 15 victims have been published. Chabad emissary Rabbi Eli Schallinger, 41 years of age, was amongst the organizers of the festive event at Bondi Beach for Hanukkah. Holocaust survivor Alex Kelteman, 87 years of age, whose wife testified that he was hit when he tried to protect her. Tibor Weitzman, who according to the reports, was also hit while defending his wife, who survived. Dan Elkayem, 27 years of age, a Jewish French citizen who emigrated to Sydney about a year ago. Rabbi Yaakov Halevi Lutein, who was also a Chabad emissary. Reuven Morrison, 72 years of age, originally from the Soviet Union, a member of the Chabad community in Australia, and 10-year-old Matilda, whose family did not agree to publish their last name but distributed her photos to the media. According to the authorities, another 60 people were injured in this attack, including 11 that were listed in serious condition. The heroic passerby who intervened, Ahmed El Ahmed, as well as 2 police officers who responded to the incident, were also wounded. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report all the truth and only the truth about what's happening in Israel and around the world. And I want to tell you that this is a spiritual war and we need your help in praying as much as in sharing the truth. And that makes all the difference in the world. So let's unite in prayer for wisdom to our leaders, for all the countries around the world to wake up to this threat that doesn't only target Jews, it targets our societies, our values, our countries, our cities, our children. Let's pray for wisdom to deal with this. Let's pray for the IDF soldiers that are defending us. Let's pray for all those that were wounded in Australia and all the victims. Let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
Shalom again, guys. Tonight, it's night number 2 of Hanukkah, and we light 2 candles. And in our tradition, we always increase the light from one night to the next. We never decrease it.
I love this. And this message hits differently in a time of war. We see a lot of darkness all around us here in Israel and around the world, but we also see Israelis standing up and you standing with the Jewish people of Israel, helping each other, supporting soldiers, rebuilding, sharing the truth. That's the spirit of the Maccabees.
That's right. And they were called the hammers. That's what it actually means in Hebrew, makevet. And today, we see that the same strength is in the people of Israel, refusing to give up hope. And let's bless those candles right now.
Yep.
Night number 2.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר של חנוכה. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני
אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשה ניסים לאבותינו, בימים ההם, בזמן הזה. Amen. Now you might notice at home that we were a bit off on that first one. That's okay, we'll try better on the next night.
We have 8 nights to get better with our singing. Plus, singing is not our strong suit.
If I had to do it for a living, I would be broke.
Yeah, definitely. But guys, I think that what's nice about Hanukkah and what's happening now all over the world is that we see lies that are being spread across the major media outlets. And what God is doing is sharing the truth of what's happening in Israel, sharing the fact that He is alive, performing miracles, and is faithful to His promises to the people of Israel and to each and every one of you. So be encouraged, guys, and eat a sufgania. This is another tradition in Hanukkah. Mati is going to finish all of them by the end of this show.
I try to have just one a holiday because I have about 8,000 calories per sufgania.
But the tradition, right, is they tried to kill us, God saved us miraculously. That's it.
One challenge for you guys is, if you're here every night, we want you to join in on these blessings every night. If you can pull off Hanukkah blessings, you can study Hebrew with no problem.
Definitely. Get your Chanukiah and sing with us.